For decades, we've kind of just thought of sleep as this simple off switch for the brain, right? Like a time when your body just powers down and does nothing. Well, get ready to completely rethink that because the latest immunological and neurological data reveals something absolutely mind-blowing. Sleep is not passive. It is an intensely active, highly orchestrated biological process that literally dictates your metabolic health, your emotional resilience, and your immune competence. In this explainer, we're going to unpack the profound biological architecture of sleep. We're going to look at exactly how a lack of sleep physically rewires your nervous system, tipping you toward chronic disease, and more importantly, how we can actually re-engineer our own biology to prevent it. And to show you just how critical this is, take a look at what happens with acute infections like bacterial sepsis. Sleep loss here isn't just an inconvenience, it is a massive, life-threatening vulnerability. When researchers interrupted sleep for just 48 hours before an infection, mortality skyrocketed from 57% all the way to 88%. And that massive drop in survival, it's accompanied by severe systemic end organ damage, like acute kidney injury and systemic muscle tissue breakdown. The body essentially goes into a deadly cytokine storm-like syndrome. It's wild to think about, but it proves that sleep absolutely isn't a luxury. It's a foundational pillar of your body's literal survival mechanisms. Section 1, the autonomic tug-of-war, sympathetic versus parasympathetic. So to understand how sleep dictates our biology to such an extreme degree, we first have to look at the invisible daily battle happening inside us. On one side, you have your sympathetic nervous system. Think of this as your body's accelerator. It's the fight-or-flight response driven by cortisol and adrenaline, and it's really only designed for short, acute bursts of stress. Now, on the other side is your built-in brake pedal, the parasympathetic rest and digest state, which is driven by vagal tone. The problem is, modern life and sleep deprivation keep that accelerator completely pinned to the floor, flooding our bodies with stress hormones and causing what we all know and feel as chronic burnout. But the real magic happens when we finally engage those brakes, specifically through a fascinating mechanism tied to the parasympathetic side. When your body actually enters a deep resting state, your vagus nerve sends out impulses that actively inhibit damaging cytokines. It's an incredible physiological reflex, meaning your neural state directly commands your inflammatory state. This is called the cholinergic anti-inflammatory pathway. By getting into a deep parasympathetic state, your brain literally stops the synthesis and release of inflammatory molecules in your tissues, protecting you against cellular death. It brilliantly shows just how deeply intertwined our nervous and immune systems really are. Moving to Section 2, the immune-sleep connection, a bidirectional dialogue. Let's peel back a layer and look at the cellular level, because immune molecules are actually pulling the levers of your sleep architecture. Now, we normally think of immune cytokines like interleukin-1 beta and TNF-alpha strictly as the bad guys, right? The things that cause inflammation and fevers when you get sick. But surprisingly, they are explicitly somnogenic. They actively generate your deep, non-rapid eye movement sleep. Your immune system literally helps put you to sleep to facilitate repair. It's the exact reason why all you want to do is nap when you catch the flu. But there's a troublemaker here, interleukin-6. When IL-6 is chronically elevated by stress or lack of sleep, it shifts your sleep architecture, promoting lighter REM sleep and totally disrupting the restorative deep sleep you desperately need. And the ripple effects of that are huge. Acute sleep loss forces a massive transition in your immune defenses. Stress hormones bind to receptors on your immune cells and actually suppress your Th1 cytokines. You can think of those Th1 cytokines as your frontline antiviral shields. But at the exact same time, it upregulates Th2 pathways, which drive systemic low-grade inflammation. This specific cellular mechanism explains exactly why you always seem to catch a cold right after a week of being chronically exhausted, like right after finals week or a massive stressful sprint at work. Which brings us to Section 3, the brain's nightly wash, the glymphatic system. Let's plunge even deeper into the microscopic fluid dynamics of the brain to uncover what happens during your absolute deepest phases of rest. During slow-wave sleep, the interstitial space, which is the physical space between your brain cells, expands by a massive 60%. I mean, just let that sink in for a second. Your brain cells literally shrink, effectively opening the floodgates for cerebrospinal fluid to rush in and mix with the surrounding fluids. Now, this hydraulic flushing system relies on specific water channels called aquaporin 4. Think of them as the brain's microscopic plumbing system. Because the brain actually lacks a traditional lymphatic system, this lymphatic network is the exact mechanism your brain uses to clear out the metabolic exhaust generated by thinking, moving, and just existing throughout the day. And the critical, absolute must-know factor here, this system is almost entirely sleep-dependent. Without this nightly wash, neurotoxic proteins start to accumulate rapidly in the brain. We're talking about beta amyloid and tau, which are the hallmark proteins of Alzheimer's disease, synuclein, which is implicated in Parkinson's, and excess glutamate, which causes direct cellular damage. If you aren't getting deep, slow-wave sleep, that 60% expansion never happens, and your brain's microscopic plumbing simply cannot do its job. This strongly correlates poor sleep, not just with waking up feeling foggy, but with the active acceleration of neurodegenerative diseases over your entire lifespan.
Section 4, the inflammatory tipping point. So what actually happens when we chronically disrupt these delicate systems, treating sleep like it's some optional luxury rather than a biological necessity? Well, it builds into a perfect storm. As you can see on this timeline, it starts simply with missed sleep. Your body interprets that as an active threat, triggering HPA axis activation and a flood of cortisol. This stress response induces that immune shift we just discussed, shutting down your antiviral defenses. That leads directly to a sustained elevation of interleukin-6 in your blood. And finally, you end up in a downward spiral of systemic, low-grade inflammation that damages tissues, accelerates aging, and fundamentally alters your metabolism.
But here is the truly sinister part of this biology. It creates a vicious feedback loop. Your lack of sleep causes inflammation, yes, but that very inflammation, specifically that elevated IL-6 and constant cortisol release, chemically blocks your brain from entering restorative slow-wave sleep. You essentially become too stressed and inflamed to get the exact type of sleep required to cure that very stress and inflammation. It's wild. And this is exactly why chronic insomnia is so incredibly difficult to break without intentional systemic intervention. Finally, Section 5, Blueprint for Biological Optimization. Fortunately, we can totally reverse engineer this neurobiology into actionable protocols to clear out brain toxins, regulate our nervous system, and optimize our health span. But first, we absolutely must respect the biological baseline. As you can see from the CDC data, the amount of cellular repair time you require shifts as you age. But for adults, the absolute floor is 7 hours, period. Falling below this doesn't just mean you're a little tired the next day, it means you are actively depriving your brain's plumbing system of the time it needs to wash away amyloid plaques, and you are failing to give your immune system the time to consolidate immune memory. You are literally shortchanging your own survival biology. So by adopting these core evidence-based behaviors, you are doing so much more than just building a cute bedtime routine. When you keep a cool, dark room or cut out that afternoon caffeine, you aren't just winding down. You are actively manipulating your endocrinology. You're lowering evening cortisol, allowing melatonin to rise naturally, and forcefully shifting your body out of that fight or flight overdrive. You are directly engaging your vagus nerve to calm systemic inflammation and cueing your autonomic nervous system to finally enter that crucial restorative parasympathetic state. I really want to leave you with this final thought to consider tonight as you turn off the lights. Every single time you close your eyes, you are initiating a spectacular, complex cascade of immune regulation, neurological repair, and metabolic balancing. Sleep is not the absence of waking life, it is the fundamental biological architect that makes waking life possible. So the question is, how will you build your architecture tonight?